Well, next up is the other scandal, the biggest scandal in American history, which is the spying on President Trump and the continued efforts to overturn the results of the election through harassment, illegal activity, and abuse of President Trump and people around him. And that was the circus of the Mueller hearing this week. And I'm glad I've had a few days to think about this before I talk to you, because you watch something and you have an immediate impression, and then there's a considered impression. And sometimes your immediate impression holds up after a few days of consideration. But my impression was, and I was warning folks on this, is that it did not matter how well Mueller performed. It was part of a play. It was part of a scheme by the Democrats to bring Mueller in to trigger and to keep the momentum going on efforts to remove the president from office. Now, I know there's been debates about whether Mueller was all there or not, and whether he was competent enough even to testify, or competent in retrospect to even run an investigation. I think those are fair questions given his demeanor. But I think you can have it both ways. I think you can suggest that he was not on top of his game mentally because of age or other impairments, but also hold him accountable because it seemed to me he knew what he was doing, because he studiously avoided testifying on the key scandal that he's involved in, or the key scandal behind the whole Trump effort, the Get Trump effort, which is the manufacturing of false allegations against then candidate Trump and continuing against then President Trump, that he was a spy and that he was a traitor. It was made up, and it was made up with the help, according to Hillary's people, with Russia intelligence sources. That's the dossier. Hillary Clinton, the Democratic National Committee, and the Obama FBI. And now, because of Judicial Watch's efforts, we know the State Department under Obama was involved in it too directly, concocted this dossier that included the help of, quote, Russia intelligence sources, saying that Trump was in some sort of conspiracy with the Russians. Treachery, they were accusing President Trump of. And it was all made up. So sure enough, Mueller was asked about it, and he said, outside my purview. I tell you what, it's in Judicial Watch's purview. And I hope it's in Attorney General Barr's purview and his colleague, Mr. Durham in Connecticut, the U.S. attorney who's looking at this. But isn't that convenient? That, to me, is a man who knows exactly what he's doing, because he is, by avoiding discussing the corrupt core of his investigation. Remember, no dossier, no Mueller special counsel, no FISA-gate warrants, no impeachment scheme against President Trump, no coup cabal. It all depended on that dossier fakery. It was used to justify spying on a presidential candidate by numerous federal agencies. It was used to justify spying on a president. And Mueller, who used this dossier, refused to talk about it. Refused to talk about its origins, its veracity, its validity. And the Democrats, and I tell you, and of course, if any honest evaluation by fair-minded folks like me and you, of course that hearing was a disaster. Remember, the whole Mueller investigation was harassment and abuse and a fraud. It was just low-rent prosecutions of crimes that typically would never be prosecuted by a federal prosecutor, let alone a special counsel. And some of the prosecutions and indictments and plea deals were corrupt. The Michael Flynn, I'm thinking Michael Flynn more specifically. Remember those raids on Roger Stone's home and Manafort's home. And then they have a 450-page document. This is the document. This is the Mueller report. And I've read it. It didn't need to be 450 pages. Could have been 20. And why was it 450 pages? Because, boy, this document looks scary. Something bad must have happened, right? The length and the volume is designed to make you think something happened that didn't happen. But as Attorney General Barr has highlighted, and Mueller himself is forced to admit, even though he slyly tried to suggest otherwise, he walked back that testimony, there was no obstruction. They had no evidence that could sustain an obstruction charge against the President of the United States, and there was no collusion. And by no collusion, this is something they've known about a year plus. At least. It's longer than that now because this is now several months old, this story, this report. No American knowingly colluded with the Russians to interfere in our election campaigns. Oh, wait, unless you mean Hillary Clinton. But that was outside Mueller's purview, and he refused to talk about it. So this whole circus of a hearing was designed to talk about this report in a dishonest way, because the report, of course, is dishonest. So you can't, if you're promoting it, you can't help but be dishonest. It's 450 pages trying to avoid and distract from its basic conclusions of no collusion and no obstruction. And you think, oh, this was a disaster for the Democrats and they're going to... No. They all are but admitting, as we speak, that they want to impeach the president based on this fraudulent report and the idea that he obstructed justice. He did not obstruct justice. He talked about and complained about Mueller. He fired Comey. He's the President of the United States. He's allowed to talk about and fire both Mueller and Comey. I tell you, one thing this hearing does, it vindicates my approach and Judicial Watch's approach that the Mueller investigation should have never been launched and should have been shut down by the president. Now, it's pretty clear Mueller didn't know some of the details of the report, but, you know, that's neither here nor there. Because the whole report is abuse. His name is on it. Now we can argue whether his name should have been on it, whether Andrew Weissman should have been on it. I tell you what, Judicial Watch found something else, another Clinton connection to the 18 angry Democrats, or whatever the phrase is, around Mueller. So his top guy, his chief of staff, is named Aaron Zelby. And it's been known generally he was another Clinton Inc. lawyer. He represented Justin Cooper, the Clinton Foundation official who helped set up the Clinton email system. We deposed him. You know what else we found out? That his attorneys who represented him in the sham FBI investigation, the Clinton emails, were paid by the Clintons. So Mr. Zelby almost certainly was paid by the Clintons. And he's sitting right next to Mueller, his right-hand guy, chief of staff, I think his title was, in the harassing investigation of Trump. And if it wasn't Mueller, who else would have been? It would have been Andrew Weissman, the top deputy, prosecutor-wise. Andrew Weissman, that Judicial Watch exposed, being tied to this anti-Trump effort by Sally Yates, the Obama holdover, Andrew Weissman sent her an email when she tried to thwart lawlessly his first travel ban in the early part of his term. She got fired for that by Trump. That was great. But he sent her an email, "I'm in awe of you." He goes to her election night party. That was raised too. And who was really running the show? Well, people say, well, who was doing the hiring? Well, Andrew Weissman was, because Judicial Watch has the documents. We've got the documents. And we've heard it through the grapevine as well, at least I have, that Mueller was nowhere to be seen during this investigation. People were dealing with the special counsel. They weren't dealing with Mueller. They were dealing with his people. But I think if it were imagine if this was like a Ken Starr, Bill Clinton type of scenario. What do you think would happen if Ken Starr showed up and gave the performance Mueller would have? They would be calls to bring in every one of his deputies, ask about his competency, whether he should have been running the investigation to begin with. Rod Rosenstein would have been brought in to say, what were you doing? Were you not supervising this man that you could not see that maybe he was not physically capable or interested in actually supervising the investigation? What a big lie the Mueller investigation was, isn't it? Because we were told and lectured by the deep state, oh, Mr. Mueller, he's got years of respected public service. His ethics, his probity, blah, blah, blah. Oh my gosh, well, according to his own testimony, he didn't seem to have much to do with the way the investigation was being run. You can look at his testimony and draw your own conclusions. Don't believe me. Look at him. You can read the transcripts online if you don't have time to view 5 hours of politicians questioning another politician. And yes, Mueller's a politician. So what next? The Democrats are trying to impeach the president. They're harassing him with subpoenas. They've actually sent out more subpoenas, or are in the process of doing them. They're going to go to court to try to get these subpoenas enforced. And fundamental to this whole process is that we're making an accusation, and it's up to the president to prove himself innocent. That's what Mueller did in abusing his office by suggesting he couldn't exonerate the president. Complete abuse of authority. I tell you what, the president should sue the whole lot of them for this abuse and victimization. He is a crime victim. He spied upon illegally, and to make matters worse, they sick a special counsel on him. The special counsel should have been investigating the spies. The spies, I'm making up a word. Those involved in a conspiracy to spy on him. So people will forget about the hearing because the media has an interest in making you forget about it, and the Democrats are going to keep on pushing the impeachment fight. Nancy Pelosi says she's against it. I'm sure there are Democrats who don't like the idea of engaging in impeachment. But they admitted it today. They said, in effect, we've been conducting an impeachment investigation. This is an abuse of authority by the House. High crimes and misdemeanors such as bribery, treason. There's nothing that the president has done or alleged to have done that rises to that. Nothing. He did nothing wrong. Do you hear me? He did nothing wrong. There's no evidence he did nothing wrong. There's no evidence he did anything wrong. Exercising his authority as president to fire Comey, appropriate. The obstruction section of the report, and Democrats will focus on this. It's gossip. It's White House people worrying about what the president was saying and doing, even though he had the right to say and do it. And what he was saying and doing was perfectly appropriate. And you had a bunch of nervous Nellies who were working for him, who were nervous about what he was saying and doing. None of that is a crime, and none of that warrants impeachment. This is just harassment. And if Mueller had been doing his job, some of the members who were questioning him would have been questioned by Mueller about their collusion with the Russians and their collusion with the Democrats in the Democratic National Committee and the campaign to spy on President Trump illegally. We've got the documents showing the Obama administration was pushing classified information to their friends in the Democratic Party, at least in the Senate. Now, Congress, at least the House, isn't going to do any investigations of any of this deep state conspiracy. I don't know what Lindsey Graham's going to do, or any Republican senators. They really, Lindsey Graham, he hasn't really done, I think, enough, if anything, other than talk about wanting to kind of put the Mueller report behind him. I don't know what that means. I mean, I understand what he's saying, but you don't put corruption behind you, guys. You expose it. You hold those you hold those responsible for it accountable to the degree your powers allow you to do, and you make sure it doesn't happen again. But that's the Washington way. We have the left try to destroy the Senate, violently overthrow its procedures to stop Kavanaugh. Nothing's done. The president is victimized. Nothing substantial has been done by Congress to vindicate him. And I hope Attorney General Barr, I'm cautiously optimistic he might do something. But as you know, we don't wait for Congress to act. We don't wait for Justice Department to act. We don't rely on the deep state controlled agencies, even if nominally they're controlled by good people like Attorney General Barr, who seems, every time he says something publicly on the issue, it's hard to disagree with him. In fact, he's shown some key leadership there. So I trust something big is going to happen. But we're not going to rely on it, and we're going to keep on doing our work. We have more documents coming out on James Comey next week. We have a court hearing next week on struck page materials. I'll talk about that with you on our next update. Judicial Watch has over 50 lawsuits on the deep state conspiracy against President Trump. And yes, we are the ones doing the oversight of the Mueller investigation. Because when you hear investigate the investigators, they don't mean investigate Mueller. We do, though. Mueller is famously saying it's not in our purview, it's not my purview to talk about this. Everything's in Judicial Watch's purview when it comes to the attack on our republic, the attack on the president. So we're going to keep on working on your behalf and with your support.